I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would discover betrayal inside his own home. My wife, Sarah, and I had been together for 10 years, raising our 2 kids in what I believed was a strong and steady marriage. We had ups and downs, sure, but I always thought love was at the center of everything. Then one night, everything changed. I came home early from work, a rare surprise since I usually worked late. The house was too quiet. Normally, my kids would be running around, or Sarah would be cooking or chatting with her friends. But that night, I heard whispers coming from our bedroom. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone, but as I got closer, the words were not for me. They were soft, flirtatious, and they cut me like a knife. I froze, my hand gripping the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed the door open just enough to see a scene I never wanted to imagine. She wasn't alone. The world tilted. My legs felt weak, but my anger gave me strength. I stormed into the room, and that's when Sarah's face changed from shock to rage. Instead of guilt or apologies, she lashed out, her words sharp, her eyes wild. And then, when I confronted her, she did something I never expected, she turned violent. That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. But more importantly, I knew I had to protect my kids. Her reaction stunned me. Instead of shame or regret, Sarah's voice rose into a scream, and she shoved me hard in the chest as if I was the one in the wrong. The man she was with scrambled out of the bed, grabbing his clothes and rushing out the back door like a coward, leaving chaos behind him. I stood my ground, but Sarah's fury only grew. She hurled accusations at me, calling me controlling, blaming me for working too much, twisting everything into a justification for her betrayal. Then she slammed a lamp against the wall, the sound echoing through the house. That's when I heard it, the frightened voices of our children down the hall. They had woken up, terrified. My heart clenched. Whatever was happening between Sarah and me, they didn't deserve to see this. I rushed to their room, kneeling beside them as they cried, their little arms wrapping tightly around my neck. In that moment, I made my decision. I couldn't let them grow up in a home filled with screaming, violence, and lies. I packed what I could, clothes, important papers, and a few toys, while Sarah raged in the background. She shouted threats, saying I'd regret leaving, that the kids were hers, not mine. But I tuned it out. My focus was on my children, their tear-streaked faces looking up at me, trusting me to protect them. When I carried them out the door into the cool night air, I knew there was no going back. My life as I knew it was over, but so was the nightmare of living with someone who had chosen betrayal over love. Driving away from the house that night, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My kids were in the back seat, silent except for little sobs now and then. Every mile I put between us and that house felt like both freedom and heartbreak. I pulled into a quiet parking lot, turned off the engine, and just sat there. My mind was racing. Where do I go? What do I do now? My whole life had just been turned upside down in a matter of hours. My daughter's small voice broke through the silence. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" I turned and looked at them, their faces pale with confusion and fear. My heart nearly shattered. I forced a steady smile, even though inside I was crumbling. "Yes," I said firmly. "We're going to be okay. I promise." I made a few calls that night. First to my brother, who told me to come over with the kids immediately. He didn't even hesitate, just said his door was open. Then I called my boss, explaining I needed time off. I didn't tell him everything, but my voice must have carried enough weight that he simply said, "Do what you need to do. We'll handle things here." When I finally laid my kids down to sleep in my brother's spare room, I stood there for a long time, watching them breathe, clutching their blankets as if holding on to some sense of safety. That was when the weight of everything truly hit me. The betrayal. The violence. The destruction of the family I thought I had. But alongside the pain, something else stirred inside me, determination. I couldn't control what Sarah had done, but I could control what happened next. My kids needed me to be strong. And I would be. The next morning, my phone lit up with call after call from Sarah. At first, I ignored them. Then the messages started pouring in, some begging me to come back, others filled with pure venom. She accused me of kidnapping the children, threatened to call the police, and then swung back to crying about how she made a mistake and that we could fix things. I didn't respond. My brother sat across the table, watching me wrestle with the storm of emotions. "You can't go back," he said firmly. "Not after what happened. Think about the kids. They need stability. They need safety." He was right. The image of my kids clutching me in fear the night before burned in my memory. That wasn't something they could just forget. Still, I knew Sarah wouldn't let go easily. By the afternoon, she was at my brother's house, pounding on the door and screaming my name. My brother stepped outside before I could. She shouted that I had no right to leave, that she would fight me in court, that the kids belonged with her. But when she saw the neighbors watching, she changed her tone, her tears flowing instantly. "Please," she begged, "don't do this to our family. Don't take them away from me." I stood in the doorway, my kids clinging to my legs. My voice was calm but steady. "I didn't take them away from you, Sarah. You drove us away. You made that choice when you betrayed us, and when you showed them who you really are." Her face hardened at my words, and in that moment, I realized something chilling: this wasn't over. The real fight was just beginning. The following days were a blur of tension and paperwork. Sarah made good on her threats. She contacted a lawyer and tried to paint me as the villain who had snatched the kids away. She even twisted the story, claiming I was dangerous and unstable. But the truth was on my side. I gathered everything I could: messages, recordings, even testimony from neighbors who had witnessed her screaming outside my brother's house. My brother stood beside me the whole way, helping me contact an attorney of my own. Meanwhile, I tried to keep life as normal as possible for the kids. I took them to school, made their favorite breakfasts, read bedtime stories every night. It wasn't easy. They asked questions I didn't always know how to answer. "When will mommy come back? Why did she yell so much?" I told them gently that sometimes adults make choices that hurt others, but that my job was to keep them safe and loved. The first custody hearing was intense. Sarah showed up dressed perfectly, playing the role of the heartbroken mother. She cried on cue, told the judge I had overreacted, and even claimed she'd been faithful all along, that I had imagined everything. I sat there, my fists clenched under the table, but I didn't lash out. Instead, my attorney calmly laid out the evidence: her late-night messages, her violent outbursts, the neighbors' statements. Piece by piece, the mask she had built began to crack. The judge didn't make a final ruling that day, but he made one thing clear: the children would remain with me until the investigation was complete. As I walked out of that courtroom with my kids' hands in mine, I felt both relief and fear. Relief that they were safe for now, but fear because I knew Sarah wasn't going to stop fighting. This was only the beginning of a long battle. Sarah didn't waste time coming up with new ways to get under my skin. When she realized the court wasn't instantly siding with her, she switched tactics. She started sending gifts for the kids: expensive toys, candy, even handwritten letters telling them how much she loved them and how I was keeping them away. It broke my heart to see the confusion in their eyes. My son asked, "Dad, why does Mom say you don't want us to see her?" I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to lash out at Sarah in front of them. "She loves you," I explained softly, "but she's not making good choices right now. My job is to make sure you're safe. That's all that matters." Still, the games didn't stop. Sarah showed up at the kids' school one afternoon without permission, trying to take them home with her. Luckily, the staff knew the custody order and called me immediately. By the time I got there, she was arguing with the principal, her voice raised, demanding that they give her children back. I walked into the office and saw my kids sitting in the corner, wide-eyed and trembling. That was the moment my resolve hardened like steel. I knelt beside them, hugged them close, and whispered, "I've got you. Don't worry." The principal asked both of us to leave, but not before Sarah shot me a look that was half desperation, half fury. She hissed, "You think you've won? This isn't over." Driving home that day, I realized she was right. It wasn't over. But unlike her, I wasn't fighting for pride or control, I was fighting for my children's peace, for their future. And that gave me strength she couldn't match. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, I started to rebuild life for the kids and me. I found a small rental house not far from my brother's place, nothing fancy, but it had a backyard where my kids could play. For the first time in a long time, I saw them laugh without fear. That sound alone gave me hope. I threw myself into creating a stable routine. Breakfast before school, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories every night. I wanted them to feel that no matter what chaos swirled outside, inside our home, they were safe. But Sarah wasn't done. She called constantly, sometimes pretending to be calm and reasonable, other times screaming through the phone. When I stopped answering, she turned to social media. She posted pictures of the kids, accusing me of keeping a mother from her children, trying to turn friends and family against me. Some people bought into her story. Others reached out to me privately, saying they knew the truth but didn't want to get caught in the middle. I learned quickly who my real friends were. Despite her attempts to stir trouble, the kids began to settle. My daughter started drawing pictures of our new house, with all of us smiling. My son told me he wanted to invite friends over, something he never asked for back when the house was filled with shouting. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when they cried for their mom, and I had to hold back my own anger to comfort them. But every day I reminded myself, this was the right path. I wasn't just leaving a broken marriage behind, I was building a better future for them. Just when I thought things were beginning to calm down, Sarah made her boldest move yet. One Friday evening, after I picked the kids up from school, I noticed a letter taped to my front door. It was from her lawyer. She was filing for full custody. My stomach dropped as I read the accusations, claims that I was alienating the children, that I was turning them against their mother, even that I was mentally unstable. Every line was twisted to make me look like the enemy. That night, I sat at the table long after the kids had gone to bed, staring at the papers. For a moment, fear gnawed at me. What if the court believed her? What if she managed to take my children away? But then I remembered the night I carried them out of the house, the way they had clung to me, begging not to go back to the chaos. That memory gave me strength. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "We're fighting this," I said firmly. The next hearing was explosive. Sarah walked in with her lawyer, confident, almost smug. She gave her speech about being a loving mother, who was being unfairly shut out. She even cried, clutching tissues, playing her role perfectly. But then it was my turn. My attorney calmly presented the evidence, her violent outbursts, her attempts to take the kids from school against orders, the social media posts attacking me. Neighbors testified about the night she screamed outside my brother's house. Piece by piece, her story unraveled. When the judge looked over his glasses and said, "The children will remain in their father's custody," Sarah's face went pale. For the first time, I saw the mask slip, and behind it was pure desperation. I walked out of that courtroom with my kids' hands in mine, stronger than ever. But deep down, I knew, Sarah wasn't finished yet. After losing in court, Sarah grew more desperate than ever. The calls stopped, the messages slowed, and for a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally giving up. But peace didn't last. One night, around 10 p.m., there was a loud knock at my door. My heart sank. When I opened it, Sarah was standing there, her eyes red, her voice trembling between rage and despair. She demanded to see the kids, shouting that I had turned them against her, and that she wouldn't leave without them. The kids woke up, peeking out from their room, their faces pale with fear. I stood between them and the chaos at the door. "You need to go, Sarah," I said firmly. "You're scaring them." That was when she tried to push past me. I blocked her, and she exploded, screaming so loudly the neighbor's porch lights flicked on. Within minutes, a squad car pulled up. Someone had called the police. The officers separated us. Sarah's words poured out in a flood, accusing me of everything under the sun. But when they spoke to the kids, their trembling voices told the truth. They didn't want to go with her, they were afraid when she yelled, they felt safe with me. Watching their small voices carry more weight than all her theatrics was both heartbreaking and powerful. For the first time, Sarah seemed to realize she had lost something she couldn't claw back with lies or anger. The officers escorted her away that night. My kids clung to me, their tears soaking my shirt, but I whispered softly, "You're safe. I've got you. No one's taking you away." As the patrol car's lights disappeared into the darkness, I knew one thing for certain: Sarah's desperate spiral wasn't just about me anymore, it was about her losing the grip she once had on all of us. The night the police escorted Sarah away became the turning point. My attorney quickly filed for an emergency custody review, using the incident as proof that Sarah's behavior posed a risk to the children. In court, the judge listened carefully as the officers testified about what had happened at my house, how Sarah had tried to force her way in, and how frightened the kids had been. Then my children's own words were read into the record, statements they'd made to a child counselor about feeling unsafe with their mother. Hearing that nearly broke me, but it also made clear what had to be done. Sarah tried to defend herself, claiming she had only acted out of love, that she had been provoked and misunderstood. But the evidence spoke louder than her tears. When the judge finally announced the decision, granting me full custody with limited, supervised visitation rights for Sarah, I felt a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't victory I felt. It was relief. Relief that my children would no longer have to live in fear of sudden outbursts, of slammed doors and shattered trust. After the hearing, I took the kids out for ice cream. They didn't fully understand the legal side of things, but they could feel the change. My daughter looked at me and said quietly, "Does this mean we don't have to be scared anymore?" I pulled her close and whispered, "That's exactly what it means." As we sat there together, ice cream dripping down their chins, I realized something important. This wasn't just the end of a painful chapter, it was the start of a new life for the three of us. Life after the court's decision wasn't instantly perfect, it never is. But slowly, the shadows that had followed us began to fade. The first change I noticed was in the kids. They started sleeping through the night without waking up in fear. My son no longer flinched at loud noises, and my daughter began humming to herself again while drawing. The little things that had disappeared during the chaos were returning, and I cherished every moment of it. I worked hard to create a sense of peace in our home. Friday nights became movie nights, with popcorn and blankets piled on the couch. Weekends were spent at the park, flying kites or kicking a ball around. I wanted them to know that family didn't have to mean shouting, slamming doors, and broken trust. It could mean laughter, safety, and love. I also started therapy, both for me and for the kids. I wanted to make sure they had the tools to process everything they had been through. At first, they were hesitant, but over time, they opened up. Hearing my daughter tell the counselor, "I feel safe with my dad," nearly brought me to tears. As for Sarah, the supervised visits began. They were short and controlled, and while she tried to put on a loving act, the kids kept their distance. They no longer saw her as the mom they once trusted. That was hard to watch, but it also reminded me that actions have consequences, and she had chosen hers. One night, as I tucked them into bed, my son whispered, "Dad, thank you for not leaving us." I kissed his forehead and told him the truth, "I never will. You're my whole world." And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed we were going to be okay. The months that followed brought a quiet we hadn't known in years. The drama, the shouting, the fear, it all felt like a storm that had finally passed. But the damage it left behind was something Sarah couldn't undo. During the supervised visits, it became painfully clear that the kids no longer looked at her the same way. They were polite, but distant. My daughter sat close to me afterward and whispered, "She's different now. I don't feel safe with her." My son nodded quietly in agreement. Sarah tried everything to win them back. She brought gifts, played the role of the doting mother, even cried in front of them. But kids see through things adults sometimes can't. They remembered the shouting, the fear, the broken trust, and no amount of presence could erase it. Eventually, she stopped showing up to some of the visits. At first, I thought she might have been plotting something else, but then I realized the truth: she was breaking under the weight of what she had lost. She no longer had the control she once wielded, and for someone like her, that was unbearable. Meanwhile, life for us began to truly blossom. The kids made new friends, brought home art projects and stories from school, and started asking about trips we could take together. I threw myself into giving them a life filled with love and stability. One evening, while watching them chase each other around the yard, I realized that Sarah's absence wasn't just an end, it was the beginning of something stronger. Our bond as a family had been forged in fire, and it was unbreakable now. I no longer felt anger toward her. Only sadness for the choices she made, and gratitude that my children and I had survived them. By the time a year had passed, our lives barely resembled the chaos we had escaped. The kids were thriving, my daughter had joined a dance class, my son was playing soccer, and both of them were smiling more than I had seen in years. The shadows that once hung over them had lifted. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to fade from our lives. She missed more and more of her supervised visits until eventually, the court suspended them altogether. At first, the kids asked why she didn't come. But over time, the questions stopped. They no longer waited at the window for her car. They no longer cried at night asking where she was. I expected to feel triumphant, but what I felt was something different: peace. It wasn't about winning against Sarah, it was about finally being free from the cycle of betrayal and violence that had defined our home. One quiet night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch and thought back to that moment when I first walked out the door with them in my arms. It had been the hardest decision of my life, but also the most important. If I had stayed, I would have lost them, not physically, but emotionally. They would have grown up in fear. Instead, they were growing up in love. The past no longer had chains on me. It was part of our story, yes, but it didn't define us anymore. We were finally moving forward. The day I knew we had fully turned the page came quietly, without drama. We were sitting at the kitchen table, finishing dinner, when my daughter suddenly said, "Dad, this feels like home." My son nodded, his mouth full of spaghetti, and added, "Yeah, it feels safe here." I froze for a moment, letting those words sink in. Safe. Home. Those were the very things I had fought so hard to give them. And hearing it from their own mouths was the greatest victory I could ever ask for. From that day forward, I stopped looking back. The anger, the betrayal, the court battles, all of it belonged to the past. My focus was on the future, raising my children to know what love and respect truly look like. We built new traditions. Weekend hikes, family game nights, road trips to places we'd never seen before. Laughter filled the walls where once there had only been shouting. Our little family wasn't broken, it was stronger than ever. As for Sarah, she became little more than a distant shadow. The choices she made had cost her everything, but that was no longer my burden to carry. My responsibility was, and always would be, to my children. One night, as I tucked them in, I whispered the same promise I had made the night we left. "You'll always be safe with me. I'll never leave you." They smiled sleepily, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew those words weren't just a promise. They were the truth. We hadn't just survived, we had found peace. And this time, it was for good.